Hello everyone. You all hear me? Hey Irene, can you hear me? Hello everyone. You all hear me? Well, I can hear me. Okay, let me mute myself on YouTube. Okay. Welcome to my live stream today. I decided I'm going to do a little creature design, just to take a break, a little bit of a break from doing more let's say authentic or realistic or accurate insects, and just have a little bit of fun. But of course, as always, I like to start from someplace grounded in reality. So I'm doing a kind of a let's say reality-based, or starting with a reality-based approach to creature design. So what I have here on my ZBrush screen is a file I made a long time ago, or a while ago, not that long ago. This is just various insect heads. So these are all real insects that I've sculpted over the years. So I have a fairly large collection on my hard drive of insect models that I made over the years. This is a kind of a nice place to start. I always like to start with a head because that's a great way to capture the personality. So just to do a quick tour of what we're looking at here, this is a bulldog ant. So this is basically an Australian ant, fairly formidable with its mandibles. They actually joust with each other. Here we have a classic honeybee, which I did some work on the honeybee last week, my last live stream, if you want to check that out. And then we have a carpenter ant. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a fire ant, Solenopsis invicta. And then we have a honey wasp and a tree leafcutter ant. This is an orchid bee with a really long proboscis. And we have a rainbow scarab beetle, and just a wide variety of different cool bugs to look at. Weevil right here, various beetles. These are not to scale, by the way. In reality, these would be very different scales. Here we have a mantis and a dragonfly. Just a whole lot of cool things, and great way to draw inspiration. And if you practice sculpting realistic insects, if you're a creature designer, it's a great way to build up a shape language to base on. The other thing that I am doing, hello everybody, and I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat, but sometimes I get wrapped up in myself and I kind of forget to look at the chat, so I apologize if I do that. So I'll try and remember to do that, to look at the chat. So I put together really quickly Google image searches for weird insects, various insects, and I have a pure ref document here, just a bunch of stuff I copied and pasted in here. A lot of bugs that I haven't done yet that I'd like to do. I was looking at this recently. This is a type of mud dauber wasp, Zeta agrilicum. I can't pronounce Latin. Which is a really cool mud dauber wasp. So I'm using this as my inspiration to start with today. If I was going to do a realistic or completely anatomically faithful version of this, it would take a lot more time, but today we're just going to fool around for fun. So that's kind of where I'm going to start with. And so let me get a new tool on here. And let's see, let's just start with a lump of clay. Actually, let's do this. Let's start with good old Z-spheres. So I'm just going to block out the basic anatomy of an insect, even though we're making up an insect here. So I want to make sure that I have, symmetry on the x-axis. And essentially, if you hear a groaning sound, that's my dog, by the way. Essentially, all insects, if we call them insects, we're going to use the term insect, they do follow a pattern of anatomy, even though there's a lot of diversity in the forms. So generally speaking, we have an insect consists of 3 main body parts. That would be a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. So let's say I'm going to make this our head, and this will be the thorax. And let's just add a couple quick just divisions here. This is going to start out looking kind of silly, but that's okay. And then I'm going to add an abdomen here at the end. So if I'm doing a mud dauber wasp or something based on a mud dauber, what's really cool about them is they have this long, slender wasp, long, slender waist, and then kind of a weird little abdomen blob at the end. And I've actually done a whole series for the Gnomon workshop based on a mud dauber wasp before, but I'm going to try and make this a bit different from that because I don't want to repeat what I've done before. But if you are curious, let me just show you real quickly. Go to the Gnomon workshop because I got a plug, man, got a plug. We go to, whoops, all right. Thank you for the ad. I had 15% off, that's great. So I did this series a while back in ZBrush, and also I think this one was done with Octane for Maya. But basically it's a series that goes through the process of sculpting a wasp like this. So it's much more in depth. So you can check that out in the Gnomon workshop. Just look for me, Eric Keller, you'll find it there. Cool. So let's just block this out real quick. And so a lot of times this is kind of how I'll start an insect. Now basically, so we have, this is going to be the head, this is going to be the thorax, this is going to be the abdomen, this is the long waist, and the legs and the wings come out of the thorax. And insects are hexapods, so by definition they always have 6 legs. Sometimes the legs might be real teeny tiny and hard to see, like on dragonflies it's kind of hard to see the front legs, but they are there. With like a praying mantis, their front legs are huge and they look like arms, but they're really just adapted legs. And oops. So I like to start with Z-spheres just so I can get the basic proportions down. And what I'll do is I'll quickly turn this into a dynamesh and then kind of chop it up into the various pieces. And I'm going to worry about the wings a little bit later. For some reason, whenever I work with Z-spheres, I always instinctively start working with a mouse. I don't know why. It's very strange. But let's just say that this is our kind of our starting place, right? So really simple, really basic, just to get something onto the canvas to start working. If I hit the A button, we're going to see that it's going to go into kind of a dynamesh kind of topology, which I think is fine. It already makes polygroups for us, but I'm going to change those polygroups as I go forward. And so let's just go ahead and say that's good enough. We'll do make adaptive skin. And so this is still the Z-sphere version. Remember, when you make adaptive skin, it makes a copy of the skin and sticks it into the toolbox if you haven't used Z-spheres before. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell. If you're in adaptive preview mode, if you hit the A key, you'll be in adaptive preview mode, right? So is this the Z-sphere or is this the skin? Well, if you press the A key and it switches back to Z-spheres, then you know that's the Z-sphere model. If you see this and you hit the A key and nothing happens, then you know that's the adaptive skin, and it'll also say skin_Z-sphere. I generally don't sculpt on the adaptive skin preview. I sculpt on the skin that it creates when you hit the make adaptive skin. So let's chop this up real quick by making some polygroups. So I'm going to get my select lasso, make sure I have symmetry on, and let's just do this, do Control W, and oops. And that'll work. Control W for the thorax. Let's hide this. Hide this. Hide this. And I'm just going to go polygroups, auto groups. And let's do, just to make sure that the groups are perfectly symmetrical across the x-axis, I'll do a mirror and weld. Oops, can't do that. I'll just do this. Mirror and weld. Okay. And I want to make sure that this neck here is all one polygroup. Okay, so I got a polygroup for the head, polygroup for the thorax, polygroup for the abdomen, and polygroup for each pair of legs. So let's just go in here and do a real quick, actually a couple things we could do. I'm going to do another dynamesh, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on keep groups or just groups, and that way when I re-dynamesh the surface, just hit the smooth button here real quick. There we go. You can see that now it's actually closed off each one of those parts. That's what, when you dynamesh with the groups button on, it'll create that kind of closed off surface for each of the polygroups, which is kind of convenient. But we could also do, I think what I'm going to do before I do a group split to make them all into subtools, I'm just going to really quickly take the move brush and just play with the proportions a little bit. I don't need this on anymore, and I'll switch over to my blue material. And let's just kind of start playing, just to get some personality going here. And I'm going to get the shape, even though I'm going to turn these into mandibles later. So if I take a look at my my reference, you see how this face is really long, but really this long part, these are the mandibles. So this is actually the face right here, and these are the mandibles. But I'm just, for the sake of getting the proportions down, and while I'm still kind of playing with the idea, I'll just make this one big surface, and then later on I'll turn it into mandibles. And when I'm in this phase, I like to do a lot of dynamesh. I think of dynamesh as kind of like a sketching tool in a way. So I'm just kind of playing with ideas, and I'm just going super fast and trying not to overthink. Just getting some ideas going. I might actually apply the eyes here after all. Look, nice big eyes. Flying insects that are predators are going to tend to have larger eyes than, say, burrowing insects that live in the ground. Depends. Like if you look at ants, you can get all kinds. And you get kind of a weevil thing going here, almost. The thorax for flying insects, I like to make them nice and beefy. I always think of, because all the muscles for the insect are going to be in the thorax. So you got the head, which is our sensory apparatus. We got eyes. We got mandibles for chewing and eating. We have antenna, and the brain, of course. So this is the central processor of the insect, whereas the thorax is where all the muscles are. So that's be the leg muscles and the wing muscles, right? So that's going to be the powerhouse, and it's always good to check out your silhouette here. So I like to make it kind of beefy, especially if it's a flying insect. So I think that looks kind of impressive. And then I'll pull this in a little bit. So the legs are going to come out here in the bottom. The insects will always have 6 legs, in earthbound insects anyways, because that's part of their classification. But those legs, like I mentioned before, can vary quite a bit in their shape and their positioning and stuff. And usually the thorax is one piece in many insects, but if you look at like beetles and stuff, you'll see that the thorax is sometimes split into 2 parts. The abdomen, of course, is where you have the guts and the internal organs like the heart. Insects, spiders have hearts. I don't believe insects have hearts. They kind of, their circulation basically is often governed by a network of internal tubes that feed to little openings throughout the body called spiracles, and that's where the oxygen diffuses in. This is actually why we have a limiting factor to the size of insects. A lot of people think it's because that insects can't support their exoskeleton beyond a certain size, but it's not. I mean, it's kind of sort of true, but kind of not. It's not the only reason, because if you look at like really large crabs who have much heavier exoskeletons, they can get much larger than insects, and same with spiders. The real limiting factor for the reason that insects can only get to a certain size, or I'd say the main limiting factor from what I've learned, is because they have this poor circulation. They just have spiracles throughout their bodies, which are just like little holes, and the oxygen goes in through those holes through a process of diffusion. Maybe they might get some help from the muscles contracting when it's flying and such. But if you only have so much oxygen throughout the organism, then it can only get to a certain size. And this is also why if you go back in time to prehistoric times, like in the Carboniferous era and that kind of stuff, you had a higher concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere, and then you ended up with much larger bugs, like the giant dragonflies and that kind of stuff, and much larger animals in general. So that's basically what I've learned. I'm not going to worry about the legs too much at the moment, just thin them out a bit. And let's say that's kind of good for a bit overall shape. I'm probably going to focus mostly on the head tonight. Let's see. Alrighty, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with the chat here. Okay, so now I had just a really basic, super simple design here. Like I say, I'm going to deal with the wings later on. I don't know if I'll get to the wings tonight. Probably going to focus mostly on the head, if I can, the head and the thorax. So at this point, I'm going to go in here, since these are all various polygroups, right? So each different polygroups, I'm going to go down here to split and just do a quick group split. It's going to say, you really want to do that? I'm going to say, yeah. And then, of course, I'm going to save. So let's save this in. We'll call this, I don't know, we'll just call it Superbug for now. Okay. And let's go to the head, and I'm going to turn on solo and have a sip of beer. Beer. Breakfast of Champions. Okay, so now this is a pretty cool looking bug overall. Let's take a look at the head. We got the antenna coming out here. We have the eyes. Most of the time with insects, the antenna are actually going to come out lower in the face. As a general rule, when dealing with creature design, the higher you put the antenna on the head, the cuter the bug. So if you want to make it look scarier and more menacing, move the antenna down lower on the face. If you want to make it look cuter, move it up higher. That's just something I've noticed over my years of sculpting insects. You can even tell, it's like, even though these are the same, basically the same type of wasp, because of the camera angle here, the antenna look a bit higher. And look at how this looks a little bit less threatening and alien than this, just based on the camera view. Here's another example. I mean, this is kind of still scary and freaky because of this is a mantis, of course, because of the freaky eyes and that kind of stuff, but the antennae are a little bit higher. They're not all the way on the top. I think mostly cartoon bugs will have the antenna on the top. Whereas if we take a look at this tiger beetle, here's a great example. This thing, I mean, the mandibles, of course, are making it look scary as hell, but also notice the antennae are really low on the face. They're all the way below the eyes. So there's a number of, here's a good example. I mean, this guy still looks kind of freaky, definitely looks freaky, especially because the eye shape is so weird. But in this case, the antennae are above the eye, and I think it makes it look a little bit less threatening, even though it's still kind of alien and freaky. It's like a longhorn beetle, I believe. So you get the idea. So thinking about antenna placement, thinking about the size of the eyes, one of the things I love about wasps is you know, this kind of division right here. Now, why this is here, that's a question only evolution can answer, but generally with flying insects, they have a flying predatory insects will have a larger field of vision lower and maybe a little bit higher, less or fewer ommatidia or less eye facing upwards, but enough that it can kind of see what's going on. And then up here, we have the ocelli, which are the 3 additional very simple eyes. Some insects don't have these. Some insects only have 2. Some have 1. A lot of flying insects have 3. Let's take a look. You can see them right here. These simple eyes there. Let's see if we can find one. Yeah, you can see them right here. And this one has crazy mandibles. Do we have them here? I don't really see them on the tiger beetle, nor do I really see ocelli on this one. I believe this is a type of ant, but you can see them up here. You can see one right here, and then 3 right here, and you get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to keep this off onto the side. And start kind of playing with dividing this up into sections. And so I'm going to use, for this I would use maybe the damn standard brush. I also like to use the SK cloth brush, which I talked about in my last stream last week. This is one of Sakaki Kuro's brushes. He also does a live stream too. And he does really cool like anime character design and that kind of stuff. So let's increase the resolution a bit on this. Bring it up a bit and maybe a little bit more. There we go, about 500,000 points. And I'm going to do this kind of plate right here, and I want my bug to be creepy, so I'm going to put the antenna down here. Just going to put a couple marks to remind myself of where I want this. And let's see. And then for the eyes, I'm going to have the eyes come down here like this. I like big eyes. I cannot lie. I mean, if you really want to make, another way to make a creepy bug is to make tiny, teeny weeny eyes or even no eyes. That can look really interesting too. And then I'm going to do this kind of thing where it's like, it's got this kind of wasp-like plate that goes through the eyes here. And do this. So just working really fast and loose here. And then this is going to be the mandibles. And I'm going to make these even longer and freakier. I'm going to exaggerate. A very long, very long time ago, I took some cool drawing classes with concept artist. Used to be went by Puddinhead. He did a lot of Magic the Gathering art, among other things. A lot of cool concept art. And even though he was a figure artist, I mean, he could draw anything. He was amazing. One thing he always used to say is just push it, push it, push it. Always push it, get it freakier. See, get the limits as far as you can go. So that's why I try to live by that mantra when I'm doing any kind of design stuff. So I'm going to do this. And here we're going to have a mouth cavity where they generally have other mouth parts. They're called like palps. They're like little finger-like projections. I'm just going to make a mouth cavity real quick here and worry about that stuff later. And I think what I want to do now is I'm going to do a quick kind of shaping with clay tubes brush with the low Z intensity, maybe like 3 or something like that. Yeah, the artwork on that stuff is great. I'm going to do a quick image search for Pudd'nhead. Pudd'nhead Wilson. That's not it. Pudd'nhead artist. Yeah, here he goes. Actually, this is a really old Gnomon Workshop series that he did. This one right here, which is really bizarro. It's worth checking out, but I was really fortunate to take classes with him live. Sitting next to this guy drawing, keep in mind, this he did with a graphite pencil, like a mechanical pencil, and an eraser. That's what he worked in. When he did digital stuff, he worked in the old painter, Corel painter or Meta Creations painter, whatever you want to call it. But just sitting next to him drawing, that's like, sitting next to Jimi Hendrix when he's playing guitar. He's just amazing, but also really just wonderful, wonderful teacher and person all around. So look him up when you get a chance. Freaky, freaky stuff. I don't know, they probably had a lot of nightmares too, but I think he's the kind of guy who probably enjoyed nightmares. Okay, back to this. Back to my own nightmare. So I'm using the clay tubes brush as kind of like a shaping tool, almost like sanding. Bring up the surface. I like to have that nice ridge there in the middle. And push this back a little bit. Some kind of exoskeleton thing right here. The muscles are going to be kind of hidden. Hello, welcome. I believe the muscles for the mandibles are going to be behind the mandibles themselves. The other thing I like to do is, once I get this kind of shaped, I'm going to separate the mandibles from the head and make them their own subtool. And then I always think it's kind of cool to make them kind of cross and somewhat asymmetrical, because you'll see that in a lot of insects. For the moment, I just want to get kind of their basic proportion down as fast as possible. I don't know if you can hear my dog groaning behind me. She's heard all this before. She didn't care. It's like bugs. Who cares about bugs? What are you going to do with a dog? Okay, so this is going to be the eye surface right here. As I mentioned before, if you want to get into working with insects or get good inspiration, get some scan data. You can get a lot of free scan data of insects from Sketchfab and other places like that. They might be kind of low quality, but it's a great place to start to get familiar with insect anatomy. I'm still learning it. It's an interesting subject. Oops. The advantage of, I'm going to make fun of character sculptors, even though I like sculpting characters too, but people who do human sculpting models, obviously human anatomy takes a long time to learn. It's not easy. But the nice thing about human anatomy is you literally have thousands of years of education on it, and loads of reference, including a mirror, which helps, and as well as familiarity. So they have that advantage when you're working on insects, as opposed to bugs. You know, humans pretty much come in this one basic shape for the most part, whereas bugs, beyond the rules of, you know, thorax, abdomen, head, 6 legs, there's so much diversity and variation that you kind of have to throw the rules out the window and just go with it. All right, so now I want to make sure that, whoops. Let's make a division here. Going to define this. I kind of want to make these plates higher than the eyes. I kind of did the opposite, but that's okay. We'll build them up. I will make the eyes a separate subtool as well, so that it's easier to put that hexagonal detail there. The ommatidia, as it were. So let's just ramp this up real quick. Another fun exercise is just to really quickly bang out a whole bunch of theme and variations on proportions to see what you can come up with. Tiny heads, big thorax, big heads, to see what you can develop and how it changes the personality of the bug. And right here is where I'm going to put the ommatidia, so it's going to be something like this. And I think right now, even though this is kind of freaky looking, it's still pretty standard as wasps go. So I need to kind of think about pushing it a little bit more, making it a bit more interesting. Let's amp up the triangularity of this head, make it a little bit more crazy. Maybe diamond shaped. That'd be kind of cool. If you take a look at like the mantises, like the orchid mantis, I mean, this is really wild how they come to a point here on some mantis eyes. It's really, really bizarro. This is a spider, of course, not an insect. Here's another one. This is almost hard to believe it's an actual thing, but this is another type of mantis. And look at this. This is just bizarro growing off the eyes here. So no matter how hard I try and push my design here, nature always has me beat. So let's see if we can really get it a bit more freaky here. And this is going to look a bit more like a cicada head now with this kind of freakiness, but I like it, and I'm going to go with it. No need to be timid, right? This is the space for the ocelli right here, so I'm going to make these fairly large. And then with some of the mantises, you get these weird horns coming off the top of their head. And since I'm talking about mantises, I'm going to take an opportunity to plug myself yet again. Why the heck not, right? This is another Gnomon workshop that I did, sculpting a orchid mantis, one of my favorite bugs. Again, this has the freaky eyes here. In this series, I go through the entire process. Again, mostly ZBrush, all the way from sculpting from Z-spheres all the way to poly paint, and in this case I did rendering in Marmoset toolbag. So check that out on the Gnomon Workshop, Eric Keller. You get my entire workflow, as well as I talk a lot about insect anatomy, specifically mantises. Oops, let this, turn the volume down so you can kind of see. So you can check that out if you want to know how I go about doing bugs when I'm trying to, and this one I'm trying to do it. I'm not trying to. I succeeded in doing an anatomically correct insect, orchid mantis. So check that out. I don't want my, yeah, I think that's kind of cool. Scorpion fly is a really cool thing to check out because it's a fly and it's got like a mantis-like qualities and scorpion-like tail. It's just nuts. Okay, so I kind of like that shape. If I'm going to do that, then I think, let's scale this down a little bit. Just so I don't have to make everything else super big. But so I want to, you know, if I'm going to have this kind of diamond shape to the head, I might want to echo that kind of shape in the thorax. You know what I mean? To give it kind of like sort of this kind of symmetry, because I can. Even from the side, also thinking about the silhouette here. You know, I like this kind of, I like to think sort of in musical terms, in terms of rhythm. Oops. You know, blah, blank. It's going to make sound effects when you're thinking sort of that kind of way. So this is going to be kind of wild. Why the heck not, man? What else are you doing? Okay. Now I don't want to make these. I want these mandibles to look fierce, not like an elephant trunk. No offense to elephants. So I'm going to split the head into different parts here. And let's do a save. Do a save next. And let me catch up on some comments here. Hello, India. How you guys doing? Do I retopologize your sculpt too? Yes, I do. So I usually start in dynamesh when I'm sketching and just for ideation. And like I've said before, I kind of think of dynamesh as like if you're in a life drawing class and you're just sketching out the basic lines of the figure. That to me is kind of like the dynamesh phase. Once you start getting to that point where you're drawing in the contour lines and you've got the forms kind of sort of figured out, that's when I switch over to a better topology. So what I'll do then is probably go to ZRemesh so I can make a low poly version of the various parts, subdivide them, you know, and project from history or whatever. And that'll be just like a sculpting topology. And at a certain point, if I decide, okay, well, I want this to make this for Unreal, or I want to make an animation topology, then I might go in and do a hand retopology for the final version. So I'll retopologize several times, but it kind of depends. The ZRemesh algorithm has gotten good enough that for a lot of insect parts, parts that don't necessarily maybe deform a whole lot, you can get away with, you know, sticking with that ZRemesher topology. It depends. If I'm doing like a game model, then I want to be much more specific about the topology, and I will retopologize it. Okay, so aside from Sketchfab, MorphBlank, and Digimorph, where do you usually get these top quality micro CT scans? And that was not words. Sometimes I will get the CT scans directly from a client. If I'm working for a museum or a scientist, then they have high quality scans that they'll send to me, and I'll use that. That's usually if I'm doing professional work for a scientist or a museum or something like that, they'll often give me the scans. And where they get them, it depends. Sometimes they use proprietary software or something like that. Or in some cases, I just work from scratch like you saw me before, working off of diagrams and photographs and modeling, maybe starting with Z-spheres and that kind of thing. But Sketchfab I found is good for, like I would say, the practice, or if you're just starting out or you just need something to get the proportions down. Where the scan data is most helpful is laying out the basic proportions and making sure you have all the parts there. But it still takes a little bit of time, excuse me, and study to make sure you understand what you're looking at, because a lot of the scans will come with a lot of noise and dirt and grime that gets caught in the scans, and they're scans of dead bugs, obviously, so they're going to be all twisted and disgusting. So you're going to sort that out, and that's where you're going to have to rely on things like books and diagrams and photographs. I don't have a central place other than the ones that you mentioned for getting scans online, especially free ones. I'm sure there are plenty of other ones. You probably find a bunch on TurboSquid and that kind of stuff. But if I'm working for a specific client, a lot of times they will provide them for me. The insect scan technology is getting better and better, so that it's easier to get higher quality scans than it used to be, and not necessarily as blobs. They're starting to use a lot of AI and that kind of stuff to help out with the scans themselves. Okay, so now I got this kind of proportions. I think that's kind of cool for the most part. I'm probably going to, maybe for the abdomen, again, thinking in terms of like rhythm, we have bump, bump, bump. So I might make this even further apart. And let's push it a bit more. And do I want it bigger? I think I want it maybe slightly smaller, but maybe longer. We'll see how that goes. It'll probably change as I go. And then what I might do is even though I'm going to go back and probably change this 1,000 times, it's nice to kind of play with these things as I go, so I can help, in my mind, decide what the personality of this insect is. And this is definitely going to be an alien one, so I'll probably make the back legs a lot longer. Let's see. That, and I'm going to go back and work on the head some more. It's time for beer. At the moment, I am doing some work for a museum in Germany, and I got the job through a scientist that I know. This is why it's good to hang out with scientists. And I'm kind of excited about it. Sculpting a whole bunch of bugs. A lot of flies. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fly fan. They kind of still gross me out. But it's all right. It depends on the fly. But you learn a lot from doing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to split this into subtools, because I like the overall shape and I don't want to necessarily keep obsessing about this. So let's do this. I'm going to switch over to the white material, and I'm going to very quickly just start painting a mask over the eyes. The compound eyes, that is. And work fast and loose. I like to try and work fast, not so much because I'm trying to beat some kind of land speed record for sculpting, but I want to avoid the overthinking thing and just kind of go with my intuition. So working fast kind of helps with that. So I'm going to do Control W to make a polygroup there, and then let's do another polygroup for the mandibles. So the other reason I'm working fast is because I only got 2 hours tonight, so make sure I get enough sculpting in that time. I want to mention a few of my favorite photographers. Peter Nezgrecki is one of my favorites. He's a scientist, Polish scientist from Harvard. I've had the pleasure of going on a couple of insect photography expeditions with him, including to Mozambique and also in Austin, Texas. And he's just a fascinating dude all around. A really wonderful person, too. And he has several books. The Smaller Majority is a really good book. There's some other really good ones you should check out. Control W. There's polygroup there, and then I think the head, it's fine I don't think I need to split this into polygroups. So let's do a little group split here, and yes, I really want to do it. And I'm going to create a little folder here for the head. I love folders. One of the greatest additions to ZBrush since Subtools, right? And then let's go to V2. So I can create kind of like a custom visibility here. That way I can switch between these two without having to turn things on and off. Let's go back to my blue material. And actually I'm going to go down here to the mandibles, and let's shape these a little bit before I separate them into individual subtools as well. Real quick here, I apologize. Okay. Double. Delete that little blobby, whatever that was. Hidden, and then let's go to dynamesh. Do a quick dynamesh. I have a 3D print going on in the background. I just love the sound of it. It's like a little robot doing its job. The thing I'm most excited about when it comes to artificial intelligence is what they had in Star Wars, which is passive-aggressive robots and robots that actually argue with you. That's something I think this society really needs. You need to get some lip from a robot like C-3PO. I mean, because when you're really trying to get something done, especially in an emergency like they had in the Millennium Falcon when they were being chased by the Empire, you really want to get into a spat or a tiff with your machinery. I think that's going to be awesome. So I can say, hey, I'd like to make a 3D print, and my 3D printer is saying, I don't want to. I don't feel like that. I don't want to print that. Or even maybe have your appliances argue with you and give you feedback on what you're trying to do and tell you that it sucks or it's been done before or they could do a better job. That, I think, that's the dream of technology. I can't wait for that to happen. I have a theory that in reality, the real plot behind Star Wars is that R2-D2 was just this passive-aggressive bitch of a robot, and he actually had a beef with some robot on the Death Star that he concocted the whole thing, the plans and everything, just to get the rebels to blow up the Death Star, just to get back at this one little R2 unit that he couldn't stand. That's my theory. Saspot 800. Yeah, I don't need AR to be giving me lip. What have we done? Best opinion I've heard on AI so far is we always thought that robots were going to take over the menial tasks. We didn't think they were going to take over the fun stuff like making art. That's not cool. Georgia? Really? Seriously? Okay. I think I want to shape these a bit more individually. We'll just see how it goes. If I screw it up, I can always just... I keep doing that S-cloth line. I don't want that. So... Did I accidentally get Evangelion colors? Evangelion? Maybe. Maybe what I'll do is... Let's dynamesh this, but lower... Let's lower the polygon count a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to do this. Yeah, all right. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? Okay. One of my favorite new features of 2024, why am I not using it? It is the knife curve, right? We all know the knife curve. We love the knife curve, don't we, folks? And then I'm going to hold Control and Shift in the space bar and choose Split to Parts. Let's turn off symmetry for a second, and then just go like this. This way it's going to split it into two parts, and then one is going to be masked. And I'll just do a auto groups. All right, pretty cool. And we could keep them as one subtool, but I'm just going to split them. I'll do a group split like this, and then I'm going to work on one, and then what I'll do is once I feel like that's in a good place, I'll do duplicate it or mirror it and get rid of the other one. But I'm just going to have this here as a visual placeholder, so I don't get too crazy. You'll see what I mean. There's 1,000 different ways to go about doing this, so it doesn't really matter. Let's take a quick pause and look at some reference. Just to remind ourselves of where we're headed. Yeah, because you can see that this is, I love these kinds of curves, these kinds of details. These aren't really crisscrossed, but some of them, let me see if we can find you'll often find honeybees will have like crisscrossed mandibles. Here's a tiger beetle. Oh, this one is delicious. Look at this thing. This is a freaking Darth Vader of insects. Yeah, you see how this is kind of like crisscrossed and overlapping there? I think, and these are the palps, the other mouth parts I was talking about. I can't go wrong with a tiger beetle. This thing is just crazy. Let's just not even pretend that exists. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's take a look at this real quick. And I'm going to go in here maybe with clay buildup. And just really kind of, that's too aggressive. Let me do clay tubes, but I'm just going to increase the Z intensity. Let's turn this on. Where did I get my reference from? Google Images. I stole them from photographers. Much apologies to photographers. I don't like to do it generally, but I just basically, I love PureRef, the application for just having reference imagery, so I use that a lot. But yeah, there's, in terms of other references, so for tonight, I just wanted to get something quick going and some cool ideas, but where do I generally get references? From a number of places. Like, I would say Google image search is like my first go-to for quick and dirty references. Obviously Pinterest and other online sources like that. Next to that, books. I love to buy books. I have shelves and shelves and shelves of books just on bugs and other things. I think I have 4 or 5 books just on ants. I have 3 books just on fire ants. And I read books too. I don't just look at the pictures. I like to learn about the subject. And then, of course, one of my favorite places to get references is to grab a camera and go out in the field and take pictures, because that's where you really, you know, there's hear me now? Hold on a second. Sorry, what happened is my chair accidentally unplugged my microphone. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Hope that wasn't too long. I wasn't talking about anything interesting. Yeah, it's my stupid chair. It got caught up in the cables. Okay, just to recap what I just did. Thank you, Georgia, my little assistant here. I just did a quick ZRemesh of that one mandible, and I'm going to do it a few more times using the half setting just to get it down to a low poly version, something like that. And now I'm going to subdivide, Control D, and I'll do a quick project history. And now I'm just going to do a little more sculpting on it. No sound still? Is it going in and out? Is that the problem? Hold on a second. All right. Good now? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn this on so I can hear that. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Now it's going to do this. I need to save anyways. Okay, let's smooth this out. Shifting it down a little bit. And go up here to, let's see, it's Control D one more time. And I'm going to go out here with my other favorite brush, H Polish, and just get this a little bit cleaner. And I need to get one of them fancy schmancy mic stands and stuff so I can look like a real pro streaming and stuff, and then I can hit my head with it. Don't forget my other favorite tool is clay polish, geometry, clay polish. Hit this, tightens everything up. Now let's go in here and then do some detailing. Actually, do a little bit more. Okay. Okay. Now let's get this close. It's this stuff that I love. Go in here and move brush. Maybe apply a little bit of teeth down here. And go back with the clay tubes and just start to kind of fill this in a little bit. down the Z intensity. Now this is my favorite part because this is where I start to just look for forms. You guys know it's the best part of doing any kind of concept or any kind of artwork is that feeling of discovery, of messing around, whether it's, you know, happy accidents or whatever. I mean, if I'm trying to do something that's faithful to and accurate as possible, then of course I want to minimize how much stuff I'm making up, and I want to try and get things as precise as possible. But as you know, that can get a little bit mentally and emotionally exhausting if you do it a lot. So every once in a while, I like to take a break and do some creature design. I can make some stuff up and have a little bit of freedom. Obviously, it depends. Some people are doing more creature design and occasional accurate work. Goes back and forth. The problem, I think, with overstudying is it can start, you know, I think a lot of times I think that being overly realistic is sometimes a creative crutch. You know, if you don't have any ideas, then you can just duplicate what you see. Not that that's a bad thing. Obviously I do it and I enjoy it, but every once in a while I realize that I miss the sense of discovery that you get from being truly creative. And if you study anatomy too much, and I think figure artists will agree with me on this, it can actually start to become a hindrance because you become so obsessed with getting things correct that you start making the same models over and over again. And you get a little bit too afraid to push the envelope and do something very different. I know I had that issue when I studied music way back when, in a former life. I really enjoyed music theory, and I studied so much music theory that when I tried to write music, I found myself completely and utterly trapped by worrying about the voice leading, the chord progression, the key changes, and so on, that it actually became kind of stale, you know. It started to sound like a musical exercise as opposed to a real expression of what I was trying to do. And so my solution for that was to join a punk rock band, which of course destroyed my hearing, but at the same time it did free me from worrying about things like 18th century counterpoint, parallel fifths, and parallel octaves, and that kind of thing, which I don't think most people worry about anymore because it's not the 18th century. Yeah, I know I'm rambling here, but you know, that's part of the fun. Hopefully the sound is off so you don't have to hear me ramble, right? I'm kind of going back and forth from roughing up the surface and adding a bit more detail. Any good advice for hard surface artists trying to dive into sculpting? I know how you use ZBrush, but my problem is making good forms. Yeah, you know, the thing is with it's a really cool question. Obviously, if you follow a lot of hard surface guys like Paul Gabriel, you know, ZModeler is where you're going to go for, you know, because ZModeler is kind of like a traditional poly modeling tool within ZBrush. The problem with ZModeler, of course, again, is you can kind of get trapped into using the same tool. So I think it's a good idea to do some sculpting and then convert that sculpt into a hard surface modeling, because doing the sculpting, of course, allows you to explore the forms a little bit without worrying about the topology, you know. So I would actually, I know I'm going to be extremely biased in saying this, but I would say, you know, one of the things I love about insects is they're right there in the middle between hard surface and organic sculpting, right? So I would say one thing you might want to try is try sculpting an ant or a beetle just to get used to, get out of the box modeling ZModeler approach and get into the sculpting thing. So kind of what I'm doing here is playing with these forms, because you can always then go over and use ZModeler to retopologize on top of those forms, but at least you're not necessarily thinking about, when you're sculpting, you don't have to worry about things like edge loops and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So you can get away from that a little bit. Then if you go back into a box modeling thing, you have that kind of, you have that freedom. You have a couple of different ways to approach a problem. I know a few times that I've sculpted a robot and I started out with more of a poly modeling approach. Things aren't working for me, so I'll stop doing that, do like a dynamesh approach, and just get some blobs of clay going, and then, like I say, kind of retopologize over that or find the forms that way. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like, my sculpts look like garbage for a long time until suddenly they click and they suddenly look good. A lot of times, I think most artists, including myself, we stop too early before it gets good, and we say, this sucks, it's not going anywhere. I know I definitely had that when I'm trying to do like a likeness or a human character or something like that. I get frustrated that it's not working, and I kind of stop too soon, right before it's actually going to start looking good. So in order to teach yourself to trust yourself, a couple other exercises I would recommend that have been helpful for me over the years is, establish a warm-up routine when you're every day, to do every single day, just like if you're practicing scales on an instrument. The two exercises I recommend for sculpting. One is take a blob of clay, just make a mess, and just go at it, just as a way to explore the tools that are within ZBrush. Don't worry about what you're trying to make. Just keep making bizarro things and changing it, and see what results. And after about, set like a little timer on your phone or something for like 20 minutes or whatever. And at the end of that 20 minutes, just delete whatever you have and never look at it again. Just accept that was just a warm-up. And then another thing that you can do, which is a similar exercise, set a timer 20 minutes a day and try and sculpt a head from scratch, a human head from scratch with zero reference. And don't worry about whether it's good, except that it might be crap. And do that every day, just 20 minutes, see how far you get. First 20 heads that you do, you might only get as far as like nose, lips, and eyes, or the basic forms blocked out. But as you do it every single day, you just start from scratch, you just throw it out at the end of it. Eventually, you'll get more and more forms. You'll get to the ear, you'll get to the other parts. But, what it'll do is it'll help build your confidence, because a lot of it is like, when you get to the point where you're not necessarily hunting for buttons, that's when ZBrush starts to really click. The problem is that I don't know if you're just starting out in ZBrush or not, but for those who are, there's that uncomfortable, horrible feeling of looking for the buttons and trying to figure out what the buttons do and which buttons you need to use. And by doing a little exercise 20 minutes a day, you find those buttons that you rely on more, or those tools that you rely on more, and then you just slowly expand your repertoire. It is a lot like learning a musical instrument. I mean, if I play guitar now, I don't have to think about where the notes are on the fretboard. I know them instinctively. I'm not even thinking, just because I did it for so freaking long, and that's a nice feeling. But of course, that didn't happen overnight. That happened after years and years and years of studying. You're just getting used to it. And ZBrush is kind of the same thing. And there's so much to learn in ZBrush. I still am learning, or I forget things, tools that are in there all the time, and I'm always learning new ones and so on. I don't know if that's helpful advice or not, but I think if you're concerned, because I have the same problem with drawing. Like, I much prefer 3D sculpting to drawing, because when I draw, or another example is if I'm doing storyboards, I get so hung up on whether or not my image actually looks good, as opposed to what a storyboard really is, which is just a quick sketch of the progression of a story, that I can't get past that. And the only cure for that is to do exercises where you stop caring about how good something is, and you're just focusing on getting the muscle memory down and getting past that stumbling block. Let's see where I'm at. I like this, but I think it's too much. So I'm going to just do a little quick H polish here. And the other thing is the problem with turning off this off. And I also want more shape here. And I've lost my shape. It's gotten too flat. You know, it's like, this is what I want to do. Okay, here's what I want to do. Shift D, let's go down a little bit. Let's close this up a little bit. Make some more interesting shapes up here. Other objects that you can practice on for hard surface model, you know, as opposed to like robots and guns and cars and spaceships, is I've done a violin before, or, you know, a guitar. Electric guitar is a great thing to practice on, because it has such beautiful, elegant forms, and they're also familiar, but it has a lot of different parts that had to fit together, and it's a great, you know, form follows function. Great example of that kind of thing. So picking little objects like that to model. I mean, there's a reason painters are constantly painting fruit, right? It's not because they're crazy about fruit or nutrition. It's because it's a great way to study light, right? Composition and things like that. It gets you away from worrying about whether you're creating the coolest thing in the world or the most original thing in the world, and you're just focusing on the exercise, which I think is helpful. I don't know, I might be stating the obvious here. Hopefully I'm giving you some kind of interesting insight. The other thing that I figured out, because I was frustrated for a long time in my progress as a CG artist, and one time I was getting really super frustrated with, because it just felt like everything I did was crap. I still, like, I have a hard time looking at the older stuff in my portfolio. They still feel the same way sometimes. But, you know, one time it occurred to me as I'm doing everything that they're saying. And they, meaning art teachers, you know, Noma workshop instructors, whatever. But it's not working, and everything looks stupid, and I hate it. And I realized one day that the thing that I wasn't doing was being patient with myself and saying, yeah, I'm doing everything that, following all the advice of all the great masters, but I'm not giving myself the time required to actually let those lessons sink in. And that was the real problem. So I just had to learn to be patient with myself and say, it's okay, just keep doing it. Just keep swimming, as some fish will tell you. And allow myself the freedom to, or allow myself the time to get better at it. You know, obviously there's a lot of places that I still need a lot of work. We all do. But it's not just a matter of doing X, Y, and Z. It's a matter of X, Y, and Z over time, and repetition that's really important. So you have to give yourself some slack sometimes and not worry about it so much. I mean, the other reason I got into insects is, I mean, it's a subject that constantly fascinates me, and there's something that I'm always discovering new things and doing insects, and there's endless diversity. But the other thing is I just needed to have something to focus on all my energies for an expanded period of time, meaning years, right? Just years working on it and trying to perfect it. And really focusing on that, just giving yourself a thing to do. And that really helped too. You know, I didn't want to do necessarily superheroes and everything because everybody else is doing superheroes, or I didn't want to do robots, or I love doing robots, but, you know, I didn't want to specialize in that because there's so many great mech artists and that kind of thing out there that, you know, competing with them just kind of became discouraging after a while. I'm like, I'll never be good as this guy or that guy, you know, and all the good ideas have been taken and blah, blah, blah. So in working with scientists on various visualization projects, I stumbled across a project that required me to work on some insects And that's when it clicked for me that I realized that there aren't a lot of people doing insects out there in the world of CG. There are plenty of other traditional artists who do, but there weren't a lot of good, really CG artists that just focused on that primarily. So that was a nice area for me to explore and kind of find my own voice in. And that kind of helped build up a lot of confidence too, because again, it's a lot of repetition and a lot of practice and sort of giving myself sort of a little bit of an identity away from all the other CG artists out there. So you're saying 9 years doing hard surface, so you're good at, I see what you're saying. So you want to get it sculpt in a short time, it makes some sense. Well, I mean, the nice thing is the hard surface stuff that you've been doing for 9+ years is definitely going to help you and definitely going to get you a lot faster. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great hard surface live streams out there, like Marco's and those guys, and those are like really great techniques. They definitely, like, I'm much more of an organic sculptor. I can do hard surface stuff okay, and I certainly can enough if I'm required to in a job, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't put myself in the same league as some of those guys. But I think that it's a good idea to take a departure from your hard surface stuff. And I don't know, try doing sculpting, take something you're familiar with, like a car or a robot or a guitar or whatever, and instead of doing your typical approach, do it with dynamesh. Dynamesh the hell out of it. Just make blobs and go about it that way and see how that changes your approach. Maybe the first few that you do will be a bit frustrating because you want to rely on those techniques that you've honed over your 9.5 years or so. But at least you could be starting out with a familiar subject and then, but exploring new techniques with that, as opposed to, say, sculpting something that's straight up more organic, whatever that might be. Does that make any sense? I mean, those are kind of some ideas that I actually did. I started out doing Maya, and I've been doing Maya professionally since, I hate to say it, but 1999. Actually, maybe even 98. So I had a much more familiarity with Maya, and I was doing NURB sculpting and that kind of stuff way back in the day, long before ZBrush came along. When ZBrush came along, it was exactly, of course, the thing I've been looking for and hoping for the longest time. So I got into it really quickly. But back then we kind of had, like, if you can find the really old Alex Alvarez tutorials on creature modeling and character modeling, we started out by lofting curves, doing NURBS curves and circles, and then lofting surfaces between them, converting that into polygons. And back then, of course, you were always worried about topology while you were modeling at the same time. The great thing that ZBrush gave us was the freedom to not worry about topology while we were modeling, so that we could discover forms in a much more organic way. But every once in a while, I go back into sort of more of not every once in a while, fairly frequently, I go back into, like, Maya. Nowadays, I'm switching over to Blender more and more to kind of, and also within ZBrush using ZModeler, I'll do some hard surface stuff. So it's nice to take a break from it every once in a while. But I have found, like I said before, every once in a while I get frustrated and the hard surface stuff is not clicking. So I'll just take a blob and dynamesh it and sculpt it. And let's see if I want to do, okay. Let's save next. I kind of like that form right now. I'm just going to go with it. Oh yeah, I understand the ego thing. I mean, for me, doing Maya since the late 90s and switching over to Blender, I have to watch beginner Blender tutorials just because I'm trying to figure out where all the freaking buttons are, and a totally different approach. And that's really difficult, so I can totally relate to that. But, that's the whole thing about art, right? Ego is always getting in the way of it. It doesn't matter what the art is. And that's the Zen approach to art, is to find a way to use art to help you get past your ego, not just with art, but the rest of life. So art's at its best when you lose yourself in it, and losing yourself means losing your ego and not worrying about how great you are and how you compare to other artists and that kind of thing. Excuse me. So you can use exercises in that way as not just to get better at your art, but also to get better at pushing your ego out of the way. My oldest brother is actually a fairly well-known yoga teacher, and it's kind of funny how he tells me, it's like everybody thinks of, the whole point of yoga, getting rid of the ego and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of ego among yoga teachers. Of course there is, because we're all humans, He has to learn how to get past that, which I always find kind of interesting. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to go into Z plugin, and let's do Subtool Master. Where'd you go? There you are. Let's do mirror. And I always append as a new subtool. Okay, so now just use the Subtool Master mirror tool to duplicate that. So I'm going to delete this. And let's turn off solo. Let's turn on transparency. And now what I'm going to do is let's ego gets in front of everything. I definitely have that problem too. It gets worse the longer you've been doing it, of course, because then you're just like, these damn kids, they don't appreciate it. I taught at ZBrush and also Maya live classes at Gnomon for years. Now I do more stuff at the Gnomon workshop. But I was just at the Gnomon campus last night, and it's always scary, considering how long I taught there and what a deep relationship I have with that school. Every once in a while I'll go there and I'll walk around and nobody knows who the hell I am, like you used to. You used to teach here? Who the hell are you? That's always tough. It's not fun, but it does happen. If we could just get rid of younger people, that would make things a lot easier. Just zero population growth, and then we can say, hey, I'm awesome forever. Where can I find TS Whittlebox brushes, clay polish? Well, the answer to that would be to actually contact Tomas himself, because I don't necessarily want to give away his brushes without talking to him. So he does have, he's on Discord, and if you go to, hold on a second, you can join the ZBrush Jewelry Workshop Discord. We have a public channel for non-members that you can check out. That's a good way to contact him, and because he might, no such luck. Okay, well then in that case, maybe he's been a little bit AWOL. Okay. What I would say is, do you want to, if you send me I forgot how to talk. Send me a direct message on Instagram. My Instagram is Lupatone01. So just type it there in the chat. Send me an Instagram, and I'll see if I can get you connected with him, and see if he's willing to share those brushes. He probably is. He's usually very cool about that kind of stuff. But yeah, send me a direct message on Instagram, Lupatone01, and I'll see what I can do about hooking you up with that. Did I meet Alex Alvarez in person? Yes, I did. So I was on, you're forcing me to reminisce here. I started when I was learning Maya back in the late 90s, there was no good resources and the manuals were horrible, and there was like 1,000 of them. So one day the Gnomon Workshop started publishing tutorials, and back then they were on VHS tape. So I used to order them in the mail, and I'd get boxes of VHS tapes, and I had to watch them on a VCR, which is insane. And this is back when I lived on the East Coast. I moved to the West Coast in 2005, specifically so I could go to the Gnomon School, because I wanted to study with John Brown, great figure sculptor, and of course, is a huge fanboy of Alex Alvarez. So the first time I met him, it's very intimidating, because he's kind of an intimidating guy. He's really, really nice. But he's very tall, and he's extra cool, and he dresses cool, and he started the Gnomon School. So I did meet him, and we've become friends ever since then, of course, because I taught at the Gnomon School for a while. And even at a certain point, they asked me to do the Intro to Maya series, and I did many iterations of it. In fact, I did the Intro to Maya for the Gnomon Workshop for Maya 2023 last year. And it's kind of funny because that is the same series that I learned Maya on way back in the 90s. So it's kind of an honor to kind of take over that series from Alex, but it was also intimidating. But yeah, I met him and I run into him every once in a while, and it's always great to catch up with him. He's a really cool guy, very interesting. I think he's somebody that deserves a little bit more appreciation sometimes, because I know that over the years, him being... He's done so much for CG instruction in general, and sometimes I think he doesn't quite get the credit he deserves. But I'm a huge fan of Alex, and definitely he's really changed my life in terms of becoming an artist and becoming a professional. You got a problem? Sorry, I gotta let my dog out. All right. Way back when, long before they had the ZBrush Summit, they used to have a Gnomon Live event at the Gnomon campus where they had lectures. It's where I first saw Neville Page give a lecture, and Jordi Ushell and all these other artists and everything, and way back when they were doing the first Avatar. And it was a huge weekend-long event, and it was a lot of fun. But the first one was really kind of crazy. Amazing demonstrations, but then in the evenings they would have entertainment on the campus, and their entertainment was this group called Robot Christ, and they were, if you guys remember Robot Wars, remember or BattleBots, they used to have the robots that would fight each other. This was like that, but the robots had flamethrowers and chainsaws, and it was extremely punk rock and very, very scary. And I remember standing there in that area watching these robots tear each other apart in what is now a parking lot at Gnomon. And it was so hot I could actually feel my eyebrows getting singed, because of the flamethrowers and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to die. But the good thing is I'm standing right next to Alex Alvarez. So if I go down, he's going down with me. And I figured they probably didn't want to, accidentally kill the guy who invited them to come and perform. So I felt a little bit of safety in that, Yes, Alex is the godfather of Maya, and I have to agree, because he's the first person who actually taught it well. Like, what I always loved about his early lecture series is that they were so free of industry bullshit, because he would tell you if something in Maya sucked or didn't work. And that's the kind of stuff I needed to hear. It's like, I don't want to just know what the tools do. I want to know what the tools do and how they work, and if they don't work, and if it's a waste of time to learn them, because there's plenty of stuff in most CG programs that is just underdeveloped and will just drive you crazy, and you can't figure out how to work. So I always appreciate the fact that he was very straightforward about that, and that's how I finally got around to getting comfortable with Maya. I have no huge allegiance to Maya itself. I wish, there was a time before Autodesk purchased Maya that it was just really kind of cool and independent and really innovative, but it was a very short-lived period in Maya history. And then once Autodesk bought it, you know, Autodesk is this massive corporation. They make most of their money from doing CAD software for engineers who are designing like buildings in Dubai. So they get a lot of money, that kind of stuff. Their entertainment division, it's kind of minuscule. So it's always a shame that they got both Maya and 3ds Max. I remember when Maya and 3D Studio Max were bitter rivals and the users all hated each other, and those are the good old days. And of course, I was also a Lightwave user for a long time too. Lightwave was a great program for a while, but again, it kind of suffered from, you know, the business decisions that often get in the way of great software and great innovation. Okay, so for the eyes here, moving on to that obviously, and this should be above the eyes. Whoops. So, click on this. Hello, there we go. This needs to be above. What do I think of the future of Maya? I think, I don't know, but I do think that the huge game changer is Blender. There's just no doubt about it. I think Blender is going to be the future of CG tools in general, because they've just gotten traditional CG tools have gotten too expensive, even with subscription models. And you know, I've been working in studios for years as a freelancer and made a lot of money being a Maya user. Not a lot, I mean, over time I've made a lot of money. It's not like, you know, gotten rich off of it or anything like that. But I made a decent living, let's put it that way, being a Maya user. And because Maya is it's the industry standard. You know, I go work at a job specifically as either a Maya or a ZBrush artist or both, which is a nice combination of skills to have. So you show up at a studio, and if you know Maya, then you're good to go. And of course, it's also true for Cinema 4D and Max and that kind of stuff. But the problem is that, you know, these smaller studios, you know, they have a limited budget, and they have to keep up all those subscriptions as well as the hardware and pay their employees and etc. So along comes something like Blender. It's becoming much more economically. There's a huge economic incentive now that Blender is actually usable, because Blender's been around for a long, long time, but also kind of sucked for a really long time. Like when I first tried it out, it was almost unusable, and I was like, screw this, I'm sticking with Maya. But now the tools are good enough that it's actually becoming usable within smaller studios for sure. And as it gets developed more and more, I think it's going to get more and more adopted. Of course, you know, Blender is sort of free, but that's with like quotation marks around it, because a lot of times you're going to have to get plugins to get the functionality that you need. But again, those plugins are often pretty inexpensive. So I think whatever the future is in terms of CG tools, it's basically the Blender as an upstart is going to, whether it's Blender or just the Blender model or the Unreal model, is going to change things significantly. Now, the real thing, what it comes down to is, does Autodesk actually care that much to invest the time to make Maya competitive, both in terms of its tools and its functionality and its pricing method with those other cheaper tools? That's the big question, you know. So it's kind of up to them. It's their game to lose. If they decide that they're just going to kind of stick along with the status quo and just say, well, you know, most of the studios use us, so we're just going to keep going the way we've been going, then I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Because the other thing is Unreal and Unity, of course, as they get more and more sophisticated, they're also going to cut into that same market. Certainly the future of rendering is real time. You know, the closer we get to better real-time rendering, because that's such a huge expense for every studio. in every project is the time it takes to render something out. And it's not quite there in my opinion, although I'm not up on the very latest in Unreal. But I know it's getting closer and closer every day. So having your core package be either free or super affordable, and then people can buy plugins to extend the capability. It's a little bit messy, but it is a lot cheaper, you know. So that's my opinion. We'll see. Yeah, that's the issue. Entertainment to Autodesk isn't that big of a deal, and I think that's exactly right. I totally agree with it. It's the same problem that we have with Apple, right? Like Apple kept buying, you know, Apple bought Shake, killed it. They bought Final Cut Pro. I don't know how much that's being used professionally anymore, because they kind of just like, you know, the problem I have with Apple is they're like your flaky friend who has a lot of money, you know, who's just, you can't really rely on them. Like my studio used to be all Apple computers. I was a huge Apple fan for the longest time. And then I just kept feeling like they got so flaky that I couldn't trust them anymore. So people will tell me, oh yeah, the latest Apple desktop is really super powerful. I'm like, yeah, but how long are they going to support that for? How long until they change their mind and decide they're going to make more money off of inventing new power cords for your iPhone, as opposed to supporting artists? And that's the irony, because Apple started out as the artist's tool, the artist's computer, and they just seem to, it's all right. You can tell I have a lot of beefs with Apple in particular, more so than any other company. It's just been a huge disappointment overall. You know, I was definitely a big Apple fan, arguing with Windows users. Now all my computers are Windows computers. I just have an iPhone. That's my only Apple product. Just can't trust them. So yeah, so I'm doing the eyes now, just kind of shaping them a little bit more. So let's do something a little, you can see it's starting to get overly lumpy and a little bit, you know, I'm still in a dynamesh kind of thing. So at this point, but I like the shape overall. I think the shape is cool. So now it's time to do a ZRemesh on these guys, and like I did last week, I'm also going to create UVs for them so that I can add the hexagon pattern, the ommatidia. You can't skimp on the eyes with insects. Eyes are one of the most important parts. Of course, the other thing is when I add the antenna, that's going to change the personality of this thing quite a bit. So I've got like 15 more minutes here. So let's do a quick ZRemesh. Let's save first. Actually, save next. Okay, so I've been the best thing about Apple is iTunes. I'll tell you my beef with Apple iTunes is I used iTunes for years, and I bought most of my music library was iTunes, and I had it all on my phone way back in the days of iPods and all that kind of stuff. And then I bought phones, and I had phones, and upgraded the iTunes and transferred my library, and all this is great. And then one time I go on this trip, and of course I want to listen to some music, and there's no internet connection where I'm at, and I plug in the headphones to listen to my favorite tunes. And if you know me, that means The Clash. And I can't listen to anything because I don't have an internet connection. I'm like, what happened to all the music that I bought and it was on my iPhone? And they had switched over to putting everything in the cloud, and I didn't realize it till it was too late. I didn't even realize that I was listening to all my music in the cloud. And I'm like, well, I thought I bought this music. I thought I paid for it. I thought it was mine to listen to. It's like, sorry, nope. That really pissed me off because it was the middle of nowhere with no tunes to listen to. But that's kind of the way all music is now. You know? Be a real hipster and strap a turntable to my back and go hiking. Okay, let's do this. Store history, do a ZRemesh. Oh, got an error. Let's do fix mesh integrity. All right. I can't argue with you if you want to sculpt bees. Bees are absolutely wonderful. I find that I keep sculpting honey. That's what I was working on the last 2 live streams. So if you want to check those out on YouTube, please do. I keep sculpting bees over and over again because they're wonderful and adorable and fantastic and interesting. But they're also kind of hard because they're such a familiar subject, and so it's a great way to practice because I keep learning more and more about the anatomy. So. Yes, I highly recommend doing bees. And I actually have a carpenter bee, I've done an orchid bee, I've done a honey wasp, I've done a few wasps, and of course the honey bee is my favorite. Make sure you get some great books. Biology of the Honeybee, The Dance of the Honeybee. Those are great ones. Of course, the trick with honeybees, of course, is the fur. You have to figure out how to sculpt them without the fur. Okay, so that's kind of cool. All right, let's take a look at this real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these into polygroups. This is the same technique that I showed last week. Let's see. So I'm going to hide that edge loop. So I switched over to the lasso select brush. Control-Shift-Click on one of these edges to hide an edge loop. Luckily, there are no spirals, so this is why I say the ZRemesher algorithm's gotten so much better, because you don't get spirals as much as we used to. And then I'm going to go in here to polygroups, do auto groups. So now I have different polygroups for the different parts. I'm going to do merge similar groups, so it's symmetrical. Control-Shift-Click to bring these back. I'm going to Control-Shift-Click on this point right here. Do Control-W. I'm sure there's a faster way to do this. This is kind of the way I've been doing it for years. So now I have a polygroup for the inside and a polygroup for the outside. And I'm going to go into Z plugin, go to UV master, symmetry, polygroups, unwrap. And if you take a look, I'll go down here to UVs and do a morph UV. So that's what my UV shells look like. So the reason I care about UVs is because I'm going to use, just like I did last time, I'm going to use the noise plugin to create my hex pattern. So I'm going to subdivide this up to, let's say 5 million, see how that goes. Might even do more, but let's do 5 million. And I'll go into surface, noise, and I'm going to set this to UV, so that's why I created the UVs. So it's going to project the noise based on my UVs. All right, and now I'm going to turn on the noise plug, go in here, hex tile, and I'll choose OK. I'm going to set mix basic noise down to 0, and I'm going to choose plugin scale and bring this way down. Let's bring up the strength a bit. Get this way down. Since this is a wasp, this could be fairly dense. Let's try this. Okay, so I'm going to choose OK. Mask by noise. So it's kind of wimpy as masks go. So let's see if I go in here to masking, and let's choose boost mask, blur mask. That's working. Let's try grow mask. Let's go back a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to clear that. Let's go back into surface, noise, edit. Let's plug in scale a little bit higher. Let's see, go in here to edit. Randomization in here. I don't know if this is going to make any difference here, but we'll give it a try. Unfortunately, 0.02 is the highest this will go. Okay. So we can also try this real quick. Is that going to make a difference? No. Some kind of gaps in there. Let's give this a try. Mask by noise. Last week it worked a lot better. Might just need more resolution here, but okay, do a little bit of editing here. I'm going to inverse this mask, and I'm going to do let's turn on poly paint and fill object. Now I'm going to clear the mask. So just basically I'm using poly paint real quick, and probably because I need more resolution here. We can real quick come in here and I'm not going to spend all night doing this. I'm just going to kind of do it fairly quickly, just so you kind of get the idea. Yeah, I use ZRemesh for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is so I can get those lower levels of subdivision, so that then when I subdivide it, if I need to smooth something out to get rid of some lumps and bumps, and go to a lower subdivision level, it's easier to smooth it. It's easier to make cleaner forms. The other reason is, in the case of the eyes, was so I could easily create UVs. So I could do this technique that I'm doing now for the ommatidia, the lenses. You know, I mean, I'm old school ZBrush. Been using ZBrush since 2004, so I tend to like to have subdivisions to work with. It's kind of funny. I remember when dynamesh first came out, it was such a huge revolution. A lot of ZBrush users refused to use it for a while. Used to have arguments over dynamesh. It's really funny in retrospect. Of course, now it's like I love dynamesh. I'll go back and forth sometimes. Okay, let's just do this. just gonna do that for now. And we'll do, whoops. I'm gonna do mask by intensity. And I'll just go in here and do a little bit of, so this will require some cleanup. I've had much more successful eyes in the past, but let's just do this for now. And go back and fix it and make it a bit better later. But there's our eyes. And let's see. Ever run into neck issues from using TQs? Yeah. I think so. I get wrist issues a lot too, even though I have the 3D connection mouse, which is pretty good. It's a really cool competitor to Wacom that I met them at. I want to find them real quick. Hold on a second. Do a little plug for them. Just my blanking out on the name. That's the problem. Okay. These guys are a nice competitor to Cintiq, and I tried them out at Z Summit. I thought they were really cool. The tablet itself is great. It has a really wonderful feel when you're drawing on it. But what I really like is this controller right here. In fact, I even like it better than my 3D connection mouse, just in terms of the buttons, because it has this really nice programmable button right here. And this is a clip-on thing, so you can move it anywhere on the tablet. And so for me, that saves a little bit of wrist pain and discomfort. So I tried it out at the Z Summit. I thought they were really cool. Yes, I'm doing an unsolicited plug for them, but check them out. The company itself was formed by people who did work at Wacom, so they're same engineers. They just formed their own company. So check them out. I think they're really cool. So it's xencelabs.com. Here, I'll paste this into the chat. Check those guys out, man. A little plug for them. Okay, so I'm going to finish up for tonight for this live stream. I want to thank everybody for joining me. I'm kind of enjoying this design, so I'm going to be streaming next week at 6 o'clock, same bat time, same bat channel, and I'm going to continue working on this this kind of concept insect and see where it takes me. We had to kind of like where it's going right now. So thanks for joining me, and have a good week, and I will see you all next time.